later on, and initially maybe just be one to get through the schematic design plan stage, and then once the projects are undertaken, they may split. But whatever the appointments
now, what
will
do
be,
we don't know then when that'll be? I mean, what's
the school committee is starting the ball rolling. It has started the ball rolling and seeking applications. And then the corresponding town administrator corresponds and talks with the superintendent several times a week. And then once we have a slate of individuals willing to serve, it'll be a joint meeting.
And the last thing is the report on the town administrator. We discussed this a long time ago. It was supposed to be a form evaluation.
Right, we're going to have to put that together. I have not put it together as of yet. I have several forms of evaluation from several different communities. We can evaluate and put it together, and then the first thing we have to do is set some goals and objectives for the administrator, which would be our charge.
I thought we had it. I thought we had an evaluation form.
We do not have an evaluation. We had an old evaluation form. What was the last time? Were you ever evaluated?
Oh, yes, I was.
You were. How long ago, I forget?
There were goals and objectives at those times a couple of years ago, 2 years ago.
Maybe longer.
Yeah, maybe three.
Maybe three. Yeah, maybe 3 or 4. 3 years, I mean. And I know back when I was on the board previously, Mr. Daly was here. We did it. But you know, I think we've got to get that going and get it done. I don't disagree. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay. Mr. Muldoon, we're going to old business.
Well, I just have 2 comments and one question of Mr. Younger. The comments are, I attended a dance recital over on Saturday night at Parker Middle School in Reading, and there were a lot of North Reading kids there, and they did a fabulous job. My wife told me that Mr. Rowe was at the dress rehearsal on Thursday night. And they
Personally?
I just want to
Personally doing the dress rehearsal?
I'm not
You
sure.
weren't showing out those knees, were you?
No.
Okay.
I just want to commend them. They did a fabulous job. And the other thing, there is a student at the middle school, 8th grade. You may have seen an article about the MCAS test where a mistake was discovered involving John Madison. Turns out it was a North Reading student, and I just want to congratulate him. His name is Nicholas Holsing. So congratulations to Nicholas. And now my one question I have is that riding around town, I still notice, I know we took a beating in terms of the winter this year. There still seems to be a lot of holes, cracks in the road. Just wondering where we stand on that. Is there some plan in place to start addressing those problems?
Yes, in fact, I have been meeting with Mr. Hanlon regarding proposed changes in our how we report potholes and get those completed. There is a plan in place. He has been filling them on a case-by-case basis where, you know, at this point he's taking care of, recall the holes,
Where we lose vehicles and people?
Yeah. Where if we don't fill them, you know, it's going to cause greater damage. The ones that have the roads that are already damaged, where he's already basically lost them, he's not prioritizing those. He's prioritizing the ones that we can actually save, and then he's going back to the ones that are on the heavily damaged roads. At this point, we are looking at, I brought to his attention, looking at some changes about how we report pothole procedures and working more as a team effort within all the departments in the town and not just the highway department to work with that. So we're in that procedure, but he has reported to us previously that he is taking care of the holes where he can actually save the streets more so than the ones the streets are already gone in the past.
Mr. Rowe?
Along that vein, we did the budget this year. One of the things we did, and I made a note at the time, that in the capital outlay program, we put off a lot that was going to be done this year and put it into next year, which dealt exactly with the roads in the town of North Reading. So next year, there's a big chunk that should have been spent this year that will be on next year's capital outlay program. Whether it'll go through or not, I don't know, but when we went through the budgets, that was where we took a big hit.
But I am looking at right now, and I've met with them twice, regarding a very progressive reporting procedure on potholes. Because you never, from my point of view, I don't want to hear about a pothole after the damage is done to the vehicle. So at this point, I want to try to get them out as much as possible, but at least have them on record so we know where they are, so we can get them completed in a timely fashion.
Generally, the police and fire departments also talk often with the DPW in relation to the critical areas from a public safety standpoint, and then, like I said, the major ones that will, eat up the front of your car. So I know there's that communication, but as Mr. Younger pointed out, Mr. Hanlon presented to us this last budget season that what he's trying to do is to minimize the cost of the town by saving those streets that can be saved rather than allowing them to deteriorate and addressing those that, as he says, have already been lost. It's scheduled to be totally redone. So you'll find some of the roads that are in terrible state of disrepair will generally be at the top of the list to be totally redone. So, again, the decrease of funding that we've had, Chapter 90 funds, has affected us also in the way we think. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Mark.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the board to consider planning process. We spoke a few moments ago about goals and objectives for the town administrator. I believe that before we could give him reasonable goals and objectives, we ought to have some overall goals and objectives for the community as a whole. We could begin to look at perhaps forecasting the operating budget, sort of revenue and expense side, so they don't only be forecast to look ahead. We've heard a lot of talk about potential overrides. I'd like to see the budget. I mean, I assume it's in such a format as we could, push the data forward with certain assumptions and have a best case, a worst case, and a most likely case, et cetera, et cetera. I think the board needs to begin to look at this. We have a lot of issues on our plate, both from a capital perspective and from an operating perspective. And perhaps the summer months may be an opportunity to align ourselves to start to begin that process. And obviously it's an iterative process, and it's a process of change, and nothing set in concrete. So I just ask that the board consider. I don't know how to affect that, so I'm asking the board to consider joining me in doing that. I'd be happy to take somewhat of a lead on that if the board saw fit. But again, I believe this is something the community needs to do. We need to begin to know what we might be faced with down the road, and we can simplify it or make it really complicated. But I think anything we do is going to be an improvement over what we have today, which is nothing. Thank you.
I think we're going to see a stepped-up time frame in relation to our budgetary considerations in the upcoming fiscal year for next July, not this coming July, for a whole host of reasons. Again, one being the school aid from the state. Again, the level of funding that whatever we receive is now not necessarily going to be the threshold. And when we start from there, the whole formula is being readjusted, and we have to monitor that very carefully as far as the effects. I know the administrator has conveyed to the board previously that the upcoming fiscal year, while it might be tight on the general government side, we're very close to being able to begin to maintain level of services within what we forecast and project to be our revenue sources. However, as everybody's well aware, on the school department side, it's a very, very difficult situation to get your arms around because of the state of flux of the funding mechanisms and how it's coming into play. So, talking with Tom earlier, it's our intention again to sit down with the Finance Committee and the School Committee to start very early on, rather than waiting till October, November, but early on, to sit down, talk about what our options are, what our expectations are, and how would we adjust and adapt to the changing times that we're in right now, and how are we going to try and maintain the level of services within our ability to pay. You know, whether we're going to be in an override situation for general operating expenses overall of the town as a whole, we don't know. Whether it's going to be specific to departments, or whether it's going to be specific for certain functions or services. Again, that's for the decision of the board to make, again, in concert with the Finance Committee and the School Committee. And I think those types of decisions, we should try and go in to any type of situation like that with as much chance of unanimity as possible, so that we can convey the same message to the general public as to what our prioritizations are, what direction we're heading in. And it's unavoidable. But you're absolutely right. We do need to sit down and step up the time frame as far as the planning process and trying to adapt to these things. And I think you're going to see that take place. That's a good suggestion. Yes? Oh, excuse me, Mr. Earl.
I agree with John, and I've tried to do that in the past on a number of occasions, because I think if we were truthfully honest last year with the people, we were in an override position last year, not only with the school but with the general government. As I mentioned, like just one particular budget was the DPW. We put off things that we should not have put off. So I agree with you 100%, because I think we really have to look at it. We have to look at it early, so we can honestly go in and tell the people exactly where we are headed.
Any other comments?
Not to belabor the point, that's a piece of it. What about the goals and direction of this board? I mean, and I understand, and we do need to meet with FinCom and school committee, but
what we've done in the past.
Would we ever have a strategy workshop where we would?
Yeah, what we've done in the past.
Priorities,
Yeah, what we've done in the past is we've asked each members of the board to outline your own list of goals and objectives, and then the chair, in concert with the town administrator, will compile it all, make a list, and say this is how it's fallen. And it's amazing how similar board members, start to prioritize things. Whether it be budget, whether it be all the way down to fixing the potholes, or the overall big picture items. Whether it be realigning departments, whether it be in the past we've talked about sharing services with other communities and looking into that regionalization of services and trying to do things in concert with other communities. And again, it's up to the board as to how you want to handle this, but we can just sit down and have a workshop session. But I think the first thing we have to do is get ourselves to sit down and individually collect our thoughts, list our prioritization of things, our goals, and our own individual goals and objectives, what we'd like to see the board to do, what we'd like to see the town administrator do. Then we'll collect the data and compile it, and we'll have a session on it to do that. So if we could, if each board member could start doing that, and we should set some sort of a timetable for this, obviously, because the months tend to run away from us. We're coming into Memorial Day, and before you know it, summer's here, and people go on vacations, and things of that nature. So if we could have a set of goals and objectives, and what are we talking about? Our next meeting is the 4th, and then the 18th. Is that what it is?
Mr. Chairman, if I could have them at least a week possibly by June 6th, only because if we're going to discuss them possibly on June 18th, it gives me a chance to compile them and put them into some semblance of a spreadsheet.
I think that's reasonable. That sound reasonable? Yep. June 6th, and then what we'll do is we'll have it as an agenda item on the 18th. And prior to that, we'll disperse what the findings are for everybody to just take a look at, and then we'll discuss it on the 18th. So we can have a list of goals and objectives and do it through the town administrator's office rather than myself. And come in and work with Tom on it.
Okay.
That would be good. And please write a note to Mr. Vino also. Also, in relation to that last meeting we reorganized, I asked for liaison assignments. We still need a couple more in here. I will make those liaison assignments and talk to the members before the next meeting. So I haven't got everybody's in yet as to what you would like to request as far as your liaison assignments. Did you have anything else, Mr. Murphy?
No, I'm all set. Thank you very much.
All right, so that was the first thing on my old and new business.